Here we have a low tunnel. Low tunnels are a nice, inexpensive structure that we can place out in our garden or in our field. They provide us the ability to warm plants up faster and get them up growing faster than if we had them out just in the field. They also can act as a barrier to keep insects out, particularly cucumber beetle on cucurbits, melons, cucumbers. To put a low tunnel together, there's a couple things that we need. One, we need some metal ribs. This is just strong wire metal. And we're going to simply bend it into a hoop shape or a curved shape. And then we're going to put it into the ground. Here we have just a metal structure that we're using, a metal wire that we're using for the hoops. You can also use very simple things like PVC tubing if you're looking at just a very small area, putting it into the ground and putting your row cover over top that PVC. Again, it's nice, it's easily reusable. It's a little bit bigger to store and a little harder to work with from year to year to get it set up. But the downside of these wires is that they do get kind of bent and out of shape a little bit. We'd like to have it into the ground about 5 or 6 inches on each side. This rib is what's going to provide the structure to the low tunnel or the row cover. Here we have the Spunbond polyethylene material for our row cover, and to use it we simply drag it over top of our ribs and create our little mini low tunnel. Now if we're outside in the garden, we need to make sure that this low tunnel or the sides of it are buried under quite a bit of soil, stone, rocks, something that is going to hold this down. If you do not get this down and buried, even just a little bit of a corner, the wind is going to come through, it's going to grab onto this Spunbond material and it's going to pull it up and pull it off of your plants, and you're going to end up with a mess out in your garden or in your field. So with row covers, there are different weights of row cover, and there's advantages and disadvantages to these different weights. A lightweight row cover is only going to provide 2, maybe 3 degrees protection. However, it's going to allow the most sunlight to penetrate through the canopy and provide light to the plants. The heavier the row cover, the more frost protection you get, even up to 5, 6, 7 degrees. So there are some tips and tricks to using the Spunbond row covers out in your garden or in your field. One is you can't leave it on all season, particularly when it gets very, very hot. It's very easy for it to get 90 to 100 degrees under here. So once you start setting flowers, you do need to remove it so that it doesn't get too hot, particularly if you're growing things like tomatoes and peppers. If you're growing things like cucumbers and melons, you have to remove the netting because you need to allow bees and other pollinators to get into the plants to allow for pollination to occur. If you have the material over, pollinators can't get in, you don't end up with any fruit. One of the nice advantages to the row covers is that it keeps out insects. This is especially advantageous when you're growing cucumbers. Cucumbers are susceptible to bacterial wilt disease. Well, that's a bacterial disease that's actually vectored or carried by the cucumber beetle. So early in the spring, typically around late May, early June, the cucumber beetles come out. They move into your cucurbits and they chew on the plants themselves and they can pass on that bacterial disease. Well, by having this row cover over the plants, the cucumber beetles can't get to the plants, and thus that first generation of cucumber beetles cannot pass along the bacterial wilt disease to those cucurbit plants. So now that the cucumber beetles die, that first generation passes, now you can pull off the row covers, allow for pollination to occur, and you should have very, very little bacterial wilt disease on those cucurbits. So if you're up in the air trying to decide whether you should go with something like a row cover or a high tunnel, you may want to look at simply the cost. A row cover is very, very cheap. You can cover in an acre for a very small amount. Whereas a high tunnel, that is a big investment. You're looking at $10, $15, even $20,000 depending on all the bells and whistles that you add to the structure. Row covers are non-permanent. At the end of the season, we pull them out of the field, we pull the hoops out of the field, and we can go through and we can till the ground, we can work the ground up, we can easily add fertilizer, we can rotate crops from year to year across different fields so that we can prevent soil disease buildup within the fields. We also allow rainfall to come through and leach soil salts from our irrigation water down throughout the soil profile. If we've got a high tunnel, that covers on all season long, and when we get rain, we're not getting any leaching underneath that polyethylene cover. It's just going down the sides of the tunnel. So there are some nice advantages to using the row covers over the high tunnel, primarily cost and ability to rotate your fields that way. The disadvantages though is that they are labor intensive. It takes a lot of work to put these individual hoops out in the field. You can see we've got one spaced here every 4 feet. Then we've got to take out the Agribond or the remade, the polyethylene material, and pull it across the plants. Now there are machines that do this, but if you're working on a small scale or a small garden, you're going to be doing this by hand. The other downside is that you have to cover these end rows. Again, that's very labor intensive to hold down this spunbond material to the ground so that it doesn't get wind blown. So the lifespan on row covers is several years. These pieces of wire can actually last you 5-10 years. Really, you stop using them when they get too bent to handle and work within the field. The spunbond row cover material, that can last you several years if you're only putting it out for, say, 4, 5, 6 weeks in the spring. You're pulling it off the rows, you're wrapping it up, or you're putting it in some sort of container to keep mice away. This material should last you several years. Did you know that there are funds available to help you build your high tunnel? Through the EQIP program, or the Environmental Quality Initiative program, there are funds available that will actually cost share or grant you money to build your first high tunnel.